Kohl's Group lost a federal court case this week that markets had not priced as a likely loss, and the fine arithmetic is what forces a repositioning decision. The court found that Kohl's misled more than 10 million shoppers through its down promotional program between February 2022 and May 2023. Kohl's dropped 3.3% to $20.44 on the day, touching an intraday low of $20.32, barely above its 52-week low of $20.10 set in February. That proximity to the 52-week floor is not coincidental. It signals the market is now pricing in a scenario where the fine exposure is not a one-quarter charge, but a structural liability that reprices the stock's downside anchor. The scale of the exposure is what the initial sell-off understates. The ACC is pursuing what it described as substantial penalties across 245 products, though the court examined only 12 sample products across 14 case studies. The distinction matters because penalties under Australian consumer law scale per contravention, and each product promotion instance constitutes a separate contravention. The highest single penalty ever imposed under that law was $438 million against Phoenix Institute of Australia. Volkswagen paid $125 million for diesel emissions misrepresentation. Kohl's is operating in that penalty band, with a product count that dwarfs those precedents. What shifts the capital flow logic here is not the fine itself, but the optionality Kohl's no longer has. A company considering whether to appeal a judgment it expected to win is in a different risk posture than one managing a known settlement. The ACC's description of the penalties as substantial before quantum is set means institutional holders cannot model the liability with confidence. An unquantifiable downside is precisely the condition that triggers de-risking rather than accumulation. The 3.3% single-day move understates the repricing if the penalty hearing extends into the next reporting cycle. But the ruling's mechanism, what the court actually found, is where the story diverges from the obvious reading.
The legal standard Justice O'Brien applied is not what the market expected, and it permanently alters how every promotional program at every Australian supermarket must now be structured. O'Brien did not find that Kohl's fabricated prices. He found that Kohl's raised prices for commercially justifiable reasons, supplier cost increases, but held those higher prices for only 4 weeks before triggering the down promotion. His threshold: consumers require 12 weeks at the higher price before a subsequent reduction constitutes a genuine discount. 4 weeks fails that test. The ruling is not a fraud finding, it is a timing finding. That distinction is the reversal card. This matters to capital allocation in a way that the initial reaction misses. If the finding had been that Kohl's invented fake reference prices, the liability would be bounded by the past conduct window, and Kohl's could simply stop. Instead, the 12-week rule operates prospectively. Any promotional program that uses a reference price, any was-now pricing structure, must now be engineered around a minimum 12-week prior price period to withstand ACC scrutiny. That restructuring cost falls on gross margin, because holding products at higher prices for 3 months before discounting either compresses promotional volumes or requires accepting that the discount period arrives later and is deeper. The counter-signal worth holding: Kohl's management indicated it may appeal. If an appeal succeeds on the timing threshold, arguing that 4 weeks is a reasonable prior price period in a category where supplier costs moved, the prospective margin impact disappears. The stock's recovery path runs directly through whether O'Brien's 12-week standard survives appellate review. Holders who sell before appeal resolution are pricing in the standard becoming permanent. Holders who stay are betting the appellate courts narrow it. What neither camp has yet accounted for is that the Guardian's data, published 4 days after the ruling, extends this timing logic to Woolworths in a direction that does not obviously resolve in Woolworths' favor.
The Guardian's synchronized promotion data is not a Kohl's story. It is a structural duopoly story that lands differently on each stock, and JPMorgan's upgrade of Woolworths the same week is the market's first attempt to price that asymmetry. CW Scanner's 2-year price tracking across 10 products, including Oral-B toothbrush kits, Coca-Cola 1.25-liter bottles, and Quilton toilet paper, shows that when Kohl's runs a promotion, Woolworths is typically at full price on the same product, and the switch happens simultaneously. Natural Confectionery Co. lollies at $2 at Kohl's on the same day they revert to $5 at Woolworths. Coca-Cola at $2 at one chain while $4 at the other, with the prices swapping the same day. This is not parallel pricing, it is coordinated promotion rotation, and the Consumer Policy Research Center's characterization, "This is not what competition looks like," carries ACCC implications beyond the down case. The critical distinction is that synchronized high-low pricing is legally separate from the down-down proceedings. The ACCC's current case against Woolworths is proceeding on different grounds. But the 12-week standard O'Brien established now functions as a reference framework for any regulator examining reference price legitimacy. Woolworths' promotional calendar, if it follows the same pattern as Kohl's, rotating products on and off promotion every 2 to 4 weeks, faces the same timing vulnerability under the same legal standard. JPMorgan's upgrade of Woolworths to overweight with a $37 price target, implying approximately 7% upside from $34.33, reads as a bet that this asymmetry resolves in Woolworths' favor. The reasoning: Woolworths has not yet received a federal court liability finding, its $18.1 billion quarterly sales beat consensus, and its $32 to $33 technical support held through the sell-off that followed a 9% intraday drop after its third quarter update. JPMorgan analyst Brian Raymond is positioning ahead of a rotation where the Kohl's liability overhang depresses Kohl's and pushes institutional money towards the cleaner balance sheet. The scenario that breaks this thesis is not complicated. If the ACC widens its synchronized pricing inquiry using the Guardian data as an evidence base, Woolworths re-enters the same regulatory queue that Kohl's is currently working through, and the $37 target becomes a ceiling, not a destination. The verification condition is whether the ACC formally expands its scope to include high-low rotation practices before Kohl's penalty quantum is set. If it does, both stocks reprice downward together. If it does not, the 10 million shopper finding remains a Kohl's-specific liability, and the $20.10 52-week low becomes the level that tells the market whether the fine will exceed what the stock has already discounted. Every day after the close, we publish a market wrap and key issue analysis. Subscribe to the channel.